The scream tore through the narrow apartment like a blade slicing glass, sharp and desperate, a sound no child should ever make. "Please, Mommy, don't hurt us." The little girl's voice trembled, raw with terror, as she wrapped her thin arms around her younger brother, her small body shaking as she shielded him behind her. The room smelled of stale air and fear, dimly lit by a flickering bulb that buzzed like it might die at any second. A woman stood before them, her face twisted between rage and exhaustion, hands clenched, eyes red from crying and something darker, desperation. The children had learned to read that look. It meant pain was coming. The girl squeezed her eyes shut, whispering silent prayers she didn't fully understand, just hoping someone, anyone, would save them. Outside, rain hammered against cracked windows, thunder rolling like the sky itself was angry at the world. What the children didn't know was that at that very moment, miles away, a black luxury SUV screeched through traffic, ignoring red lights, horns blaring as a man in an expensive suit leaned forward, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. This man, this ruthless billionaire known in boardrooms for crushing competitors without mercy, had just received a phone call that shattered his carefully built empire of control. A single sentence echoed in his head again and again: "Sir, we found your children." His hands shook on the steering wheel. Children. His children. The ones he had never known. The ones he had unknowingly left behind years ago when ambition mattered more than love. Flashbacks slammed into him without mercy, memories of a woman he once loved, poor, proud, and terrified of his world. A woman who disappeared without a trace after he chose money over her tears. He had told himself she'd moved on. That she'd be fine. He was wrong. So painfully wrong. Back in the apartment, the woman stepped closer, her voice breaking as she screamed about bills, hunger, a world that had beaten her down until she couldn't breathe anymore. The little boy began to cry, soft at first, then uncontrollably, his sobs fueling the woman's rage instead of calming it. The girl dropped to her knees, pressing her forehead to the floor. "Please. I'll be good. I promise. Just don't hurt my brother." That sentence, so small, so selfless, felt like a knife to the soul of anyone who could hear it. And fate was listening. Tires screeched outside. Doors slammed. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. The woman froze, confusion flickering across her face just as the apartment door exploded open. The frame cracked, wood splintering, as a man stepped inside, soaked from rain, eyes blazing, chest rising and falling like he'd run through hell to get there. Silence crashed into the room. The children looked up slowly, terrified of this new stranger, unaware that the man staring back at them was their father. The woman's face drained of color. "Why you?" she whispered. The billionaire took one step forward, his voice breaking for the first time in decades. "Get away from my children." In that moment, the power he had chased his entire life meant nothing. Stocks, mansions, fame, none of it mattered compared to the sight of his daughter's bruised arms and his son's tear-streaked face. He dropped to his knees in front of them, ignoring the shattered door, the rain pouring in behind him, the world watching. The little girl flinched, expecting another blow, and that broke him completely. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I'm here now. I swear. I won't ever leave again." The chapter of their suffering was ending, but the battle for redemption had only just begun. The rain continued to fall outside the shattered apartment door as if the sky itself refused to look away from what was unfolding inside, and for a long moment no one spoke, the air thick with shock, regret, and fear, until the little boy whimpered softly and the billionaire father snapped back to reality, instantly pulling his children into his arms with a protective strength that felt unreal to them, his expensive suit soaking up their tears as he whispered apology after apology, words pouring out like blood from an open wound, confessing sins he could never undo but would spend the rest of his life trying to make right, while the woman, once the love of his life, collapsed into a chair, her anger dissolving into sobs as years of buried pain finally erupted, screaming that she had begged him for help, begged him to choose them, but he had chosen boardrooms over birthdays and deals over diapers. And now the children had paid the price, each word striking him harder than any enemy ever had, yet he didn't defend himself, didn't interrupt, because he knew every accusation was true. Within minutes, security and child protection officers arrived, alerted by his team who had traced the children's existence only days earlier, and though the woman panicked at first, fearing her children would be taken away, the father stood firm, placing himself between them and the authorities, his voice calm but commanding as he took full responsibility, promising therapy, care, protection, and most importantly, presence. The following weeks unfolded like a storm of change, courtrooms instead of penthouses, bedtime stories instead of late-night deals, school meetings replacing shareholder calls, as the billionaire shocked the world by stepping down as CEO, headlines exploding with speculation while he quietly rebuilt something far more important than an empire. The children, confused and fragile, slowly began to trust him, the little girl no longer screaming in her sleep once she realized someone would always come when she cried, and the little boy learning to laugh without fear, while the father watched every small victory like a miracle he didn't deserve. One night, as he tucked them into their new home, a warm, light-filled place filled not with luxury but safety, the little girl looked at him with wide eyes and asked, "Daddy, you won't disappear like before, right?" His chest tightened as he held her hand and swore an oath deeper than any contract he had ever signed, promising that no matter how dark the world became, he would always run toward them, never away again. The mother, now receiving help and healing herself, watched from the doorway, realizing that broken people could still become better, that love delayed was not always love denied, and as the family slowly pieced itself back together, the father funded shelters, counseling centers, and child protection programs across the country, using his wealth not to dominate but to defend, his story becoming a quiet revolution rather than a loud headline. Years later, when asked in an interview what success truly meant, he didn't mention money or power, he simply smiled and said success was hearing his daughter laugh freely and his son sleep peacefully, knowing fear no longer lived in their home, and as the camera faded out, one truth remained undeniable. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters. The world thought the story ended there, with redemption neatly wrapped in headlines and charity galas, but healing is never that simple, and the real battle began long after the cameras turned away, because trauma doesn't vanish when danger leaves, it lingers in the quiet moments, in sudden flinches, in nightmares that claw their way back without warning. The little girl still woke up some nights gasping for air, her body frozen as if the past had returned, and every single time, her father was there before the scream could fully escape, sitting on the edge of her bed, whispering softly until her breathing slowed, holding her as if letting go might break her forever, silently hating the man he used to be for not being there sooner. The boy struggled too, jumping at loud noises, hiding behind furniture when voices rose, and the father learned patience the hard way, learning that love wasn't about grand gestures but showing up again and again, even when progress felt invisible. The mother carried her own scars, guilt gnawing at her for the moments she lost control, shame whispering that she didn't deserve forgiveness, yet the father never spoke a word of blame again, only reminding her that broken people can still heal when they are finally supported instead of abandoned. Slowly, painfully, the family found its rhythm, therapy sessions filled with tears, dinners where laughter felt strange at first, birthdays celebrated properly for the very first time, and each small victory felt bigger than any billion-dollar deal he had ever closed. But the past wasn't done testing them. One afternoon, an unannounced visit from child welfare reopened old wounds, their questions clinical and cold, their presence making the children cling to their father in silent panic, and in that moment the man who once feared nothing felt terror like never before, calmly answering every question while his heart pounded, determined that no system, no mistake, no shadow from the past would ever take his children away again.